fell again. I fell a third time. Can't get away from the sin. I keep falling. Then I come back to you, crawling, asking forgive me now I'm ballin', knowing that I let you down, appalling. I don't wanna jeopardize my calling. When I hear your voice no more I'm halting. I just wanna live in the world you're revolving. I am so imperfect I'm getting involved in these flesh-tied friends, the blind consulting, pulling me away from the world and revolting. Asking for forgiveness is probably insulting, but you keep taking me back and you're vaulting. Give me chances. You keep giving me chances. You give me chances. You just keep giving me chances. King. Royalty, stand up, brand up, fam up, hand out, no way, hands up, know what, name that, it's mine, claim that, it's time, message, we shine, above all, the decline, the darkness cannot last, the shadow of my past, before I gain knowledge of heritage I have, the bloodline that I share, most powerful out here, the mover of mountains is who I am touting, the richest among us is who I'm the son of, from sundown to sun up, that's how I the come up, position is just mine, the favor in due time, can't have it, man you lying, the powerless you trying, enemy beneath me, there's nothing to teach me, the people receive me, cause my God complete me, and my God does keep me, and my God they free me, and my God redeem me, and my God relieve me, I'm king of dominion, crown me, I am winning my position, God's giving, God's in it, God's showing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Elevation Podcast. My name is Shawn Riff-Raff, and we have someone special today, author, trainer, public speaker, and probably some other titles that I'm not saying correctly. Mike Acker, how are you doing, man?
Hey, it's so good to be here, Shawn. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, no problem, man. Thanks for being here. You have a very, very interesting life, interesting story, and I'm excited to share that with you. What title do you go by? I mean, you're author, you're CEO, you're
It just depends on really what audience I'm talking to, right? So, my favorite title right there is right here. Dad, that's my favorite title.
Okay.
but only one person should call me that. So
right.
But the author, speaker, coach, all of those work.
You have such an interesting story. I really want for everyone to sort of hear your story. And because it is such an interesting story, and I always tell people how it's so interesting how even though people can be from different worlds and across the across the world, really across the country, it doesn't matter. Our stories you can always find the similarities in our story, and so it's interesting. I really want everyone to kind of just hear your story and see where you're coming from, because that'll create a lot of context for our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm living as an entrepreneur. My wife and I, we moved across country and we went full time into what now I'm doing with two different companies, a publishing group, and then also with my coaching, speaking, and writing business. So where did I get that entrepreneurial spirit? I tell people that I get it from my dad. That my dad in the 70s was a pharmaceutical entrepreneur. He was a drug dealer, legit drug dealer too. Like not like, just sell a little bit of pot, but he decided that after selling a little bit of pot out of his trunk one time while he was at University of Washington, that was making way more money than any other job he had. So he decided that he was going to learn Spanish and he was going to learn how to fly planes. And then he'd buy a plane and he'd go down and cut out the middleman and go straight to Central America and South America to pick up the product and then fly it back. So at the height of what he was doing, my mom was telling me that he had 5 yachts, 5 planes. He was going back and forth, and he was living the high life. Now, this is before cartels, so it's a little bit different in the
Right.
70s than what we see
Gotcha.
on TV now.
Right.
He was going back and forth and doing that. From there, he married my mom, and my mom was one of many women that he was with at the time, and she won them all out, and he had them all propped up in different houses, and she was a witch. So my dad was a drug dealer, my mom was a witch, and I became a pastor.
I was wait, stop, back up. um, let me ask you this question just to clear up. What do you mean by witch when you say it? Because just in case some of us don't really understand what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. That definition of the word has changed throughout the time. I mean, we have Harry Potter now, which has given us a whole different view of what it looks like to be a witch. But my mom in the 70s would have been called a white witch, meaning that she used her magic or her supernatural powers, her supernatural connections to do good and not bad. I know people are listening going like, what? So she would cook with healing powers. And it was, I know, it's weird even talking about it, but transcendental meditation, astral projection, talking to other spirits, and really all kinds of. Here's what happened, Shawn. I'm talking to my mom, and she said, it's time for you to know our background. And so she starts laying on me all this stuff. And I was about 16, 15 at the time. I remember just like my mouth is just like tell me more, but at the same time, you're totally freaking me out. My dad was
Wow.
what?
Yeah.
And you did what? So that was my mom. That was my dad. They met together. At the time, my mom met my dad. She was running away from an abusive boyfriend who was trying to kill her. And he had protection, the type of protection that keeps bad people away. And
Right.
he was able to secure her. And then eventually they got married. And then they switched from illegitimate entrepreneurship into the coffee business right around the same time Starbucks did, not
Wow.
too far away from Starbucks, and did
Wow.
extremely well in that. So that's the beginning of my story.
So, okay. So, you come from a family that has a drug dealing father and a mother who is a witch, and you turned out to be a pastor. How did that come about?
Yeah. So they had this radical transformation right around when I was 3, 4 years old, and both of them had this encounter with God, and they had this sense of who He was, and both both radical stories of how that happened. So then they said neither of them knew anything about the Bible story. They didn't grow up in a church that spoke English. My mom had gone to Latin masses. She didn't
Okay.
understand it. My dad was total agnostic, thought it was stupid.
Right.
And so they had this radical encounter. Here's how I say to people. So people who embrace the Christian faith, they say, tell me more. Others who say, well, that's not my story. I just say, well, they made a choice because ultimately both are true. And so they made
Right.
a choice from going from one lifestyle to another lifestyle. And when they looked at Jesus, they didn't see a political figure. They
Right.
saw someone who served and loved. And so they emulated that to us, and they modeled that for us. And so all of a sudden we were going to the streets of Seattle taking care of the homeless people. We were going on trips to Mexico taking care of poor people. We were investing finances that we never invested before in serving the world. I mean, they jumped all in. We're going to nursing
Wow.
homes. We're taking care of HIV/AIDS victims
Wow.
in the time of the 80s when you didn't know if you could catch that through a toilet seat. I mean, it was pretty
Right.
crazy,
Right.
some of the things
Yeah.
we were
Yeah. I
doing.
remember.
Yeah, we smuggled Bibles into China when I was 5 years old.
Really?
Yeah, they put the Bibles under my sister and I's suitcase, like
Wow.
under our clothes, with those old. Do you remember those old, really hard suitcases that would
Yeah.
bang against your knee when you
Yeah.
carried them? You know what I'm talking
Absolutely
about?
do.
Nothing like the soft gliding ones now.
Yeah.
So we did all of that, and then when I was about 10 years old, my dad had transitioned from doing the coffee business, and he had transitioned to law practice. So
Oh wow.
he had his law degree while he was selling drugs, and then he went into it full time, and we just settled down to be this nice religious God-fearing family in a small town in a cul-de-sac, riding our bicycles. My mom, my sister and I had no idea of their history, right?
Right.
And then my dad comes home and says, I quit my job. We're moving to Mexico. We're going to go serve the poor down there. So after our initial shock, we
What?
moved. We moved after my fourth grade year to Mexico.
Wow. What was that like? So you moved. I mean, I already know this because I read it, but you you moved, and you went to school in Mexico.
Yeah.
What was that like for you as a kid? That kind of change.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always about what you're leaving behind.
Yeah.
And I left behind some triumph and I left behind a group of friends. And that
Hmm.
was so difficult for me. I left behind what I knew. I had triumphed over actually some adversity in speaking. So I'm speaking now, but when I was a kid, I had a speech impediment. So I
Hmm.
couldn't say certain words. So I had to get over that and get to a spot where I could speak in front of people and enjoy it. And I had a group of friends and I had all the familiarity. And then I
Mm.
moved and lost all of that because
Wow.
now the triumph is no longer relevant because I'm now
Hmm.
learning a new language. And
Uh-huh.
now I don't have the friends and I don't have the familiarity of that environment. So I get put into a school sort of by my choice. I said, Dad, I think it'd be good for me to learn Spanish. A friend of mine went to a school. You should put me in school. But my friend went to this nice private school where people are a little bit more familiar with Americans, a little bit
Right.
more.
Okay.
And my dad had a connection with someone in a public school. And the public school wasn't just anywhere. It was an inner city downtown Mazatlan, away from the tourist groups, where most of them had never seen, this is 1990, most of them had never seen someone as pale as me in person. And American media was about 6 months behind at that point in time. So if
Wow.
you had a great movie that came out, you'd wait 6 months for it to come to the one of the two theaters in this nearly million person city extended area. So
Wow.
so I get thrown in. And Shawn, at the time, I had this long blonde hair. I still have the blue eyes. I was quite pale and I was very tall and very lanky. Like I didn't have any muscle to these bones, so I was all limbs.
Sounds like me.
So,
Except for the blonde, sounds like me.
so my dad brings me to the school, right? And he says, I'm gonna go talk to the principal. Now my dad can talk, right? So he goes in there and he's talking. He goes, you just wait out here. And if at the end of the time you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. So the moment he leaves me behind, I'm thinking, man, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. So he goes away and he's gone, I don't know, for hours. It feels like it was probably like 20 minutes, but he goes away for a good period of time. And the entire school comes out of their classrooms to look at me. I mean, I'm an anomaly. They've
Right.
never seen an American close that way, right? So they would send people in this bubble they created around me. Literally, the entire school got out of their classes to surround me because it was just a weird thing. What happened? And they would send people to come touch me and say, "What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? What's your name?" So I just stood there going, "Mike, Mike, Mike, Mike." So my dad comes out of the classroom and literally, no joke, doesn't come over and give me a high five or a hug or tell me anything. Goes, "All right, Mike, I'll pick you up at 2:30 or whatever the time was." I'm like, ah. So some
Wow.
girls grabbed my hand. You know, when you're in fifth grade, that's not cool. So some girls grabbed my hand and they were like leaning me over to the classroom. And I was given the seat of one of the girls. And so she sat on my lap and I'm like, what are you doing? I'm cooties time. Get off of me. This is weird. And I went to school and it was
Wow.
quite traumatic in that year. Interesting thing, and I always make sure that people hear this because I absolutely love Mexico. It was difficult at the beginning, but by the time I left, I had grown more Mexican in my culture than I
Hmm.
was American. And I felt
Wow.
more comfortable in that environment with those people than I did anywhere else. But it
Right.
didn't start that way.
Right. How did with all of the really differences in all of your stories, how did that end up with you being a pastor? Like how did being a pastor come into that? Did that come into? Because it's, I mean, like you have a
Yeah,
lot of different parts of you that make up who you are. But how
exactly.
did being a pastor? How did that matriculate into being a pastor?
Yeah, so we went from that entrepreneurship, and now we're in a place where we're living it out in Mexico, and I'm watching my parents do that. So faith was integral to my life. And then I learned how big of a difference that God had made in my family when I was around 15, 16.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved back to the United States after a series of big choices, it really became this, what do I want to do with myself? I was going to become a lawyer. And so here I am seeking for the purpose of my life. What is my mission? What do I want to be about?
Right.
What do I hold dear? What do I want to leave behind? And I always tell people, find out those three questions. And ultimately, those questions, my prayer, the model I had for me, set me on a path towards entering into pastoring. So I became a pastor at 22 at a small church north of Seattle and had a great overall about 9 years there. Eventually, I
Mm-hmm.
became the senior pastor there, moved on and did that for another 6 years somewhere else, and then joined a communications team at a large church in California, as well as helping out Next Gen. So overall 18 years of pastoring,
Mm.
and it was quite a difference from what my parents gave to what I did. I tell people it's so important the choices you make, because the choices you make you,
Right.
and not only you, the choices you make leave a legacy.
Right. So now, so you from moving from pastor to what you do now, right?
Yeah.
I'm maybe jumping over vital moments of your life, but we've got limited time here. But moving from a pastor to what you do now. Now you're a speaker. You've written a book. I saw on Forbes that they mentioned your book on Forbes as one of the top 7 books to get that will help you conquer your fear of public speaking. So one of the top 7 books to get. What? How did you transition from pastor? Well, first of all, what made you transition from being a pastor to where you are now?
Yeah. There was a season in pastoring where I just got tired,
Yeah.
and I just thought, I don't know if I got this in me right now. I don't know if I have much more to give in that regards. And through a series of decisions, including financial decisions, I decided that I needed to take a step into a different direction. I got recruited into some sales. So I ended
Mm-hmm.
up doing a sales role after some executive work. And yet that was all just, that was just a job that I was doing. Along the way, for that entire time, I was coaching people how to speak. Really, I
Mm-hmm.
had overcome that when I was a kid. I had learned it again when I was in Mexico. And then in college, I had to learn it again as I reacclimated to the United States. So
Right.
I had my own story of triumph over
Mm.
speaking and being nervous and speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was working with clients again and again, they said, how do I overcome being nervous? How do I do this thing of public speaking? And so I wrote down the lesson that I would give them, the teaching that I would give them, the coaching. And I put it out there. I spent some time putting it together. And when I put it out there, it took off.
Mm.
It gained notoriety, a couple groups that promoted it. I ran some ads. The book, the book met the need. And a year and a half later, Speak with No Fear is regularly a bestseller on Amazon.
Mm.
It's being sold in Australia, in India, in UK. I get people who call me from the book. They'll find me online and they'll call me from the Middle East,
Mm.
from Zambia, I mean, it's pretty crazy, the people reaching out.
That's crazy.
One person picked it up at the Minneapolis airport and said, this is like the Bible to me, which I felt a little bit
Wow.
conflicted. But overall, that book became almost this building block for me to not just do a job,
Mm-hmm.
but to launch out. And so it was a side hustle that I was running, and the book escalated it. So I turned it into a course to be able to manage that a little bit better. And that brought even more people. And so now I take people through courses. I do workshops for companies like Adobe and Dallas International School and so many others
Sure.
on helping them do what I did,
Right.
overcome the nervousness and the fear of speaking.
Wow, that's super interesting to have that kind of success from being where you were as a just that's as a kid. So with that with what you do as in speaking, how like when you're looking at when you're talking to people who need advice in that area, what are some Other than by the book, what are some what are some things that you tell people, when you go out and you speak to them?
Yeah, and there's so many different areas, but I one of the ones I love is know who you are before you try to tell people something.
Mm,
That so much of what we say comes from who we are. I mean, obviously, this one is very direct because you've been asking questions about my story,
right.
but so much of who we are and what we do comes from our own experiences, our own values, our mission. And then when we try to say something, it's not just the words that people are picking up, it's the person that is saying those words.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Absolutely.
not just the words that you say that is the message, it's actually the person who says it.
Right.
The person matters. So if you're struggling with questions of speaker identity or imposter syndrome,
Right.
or wondering whether you like your own voice or
Mm-hmm.
other questions like that, it
Mm-hmm.
comes through when you speak.
Mm-hmm.
So even my book, Speak with No Fear, a lot of it is here's these internal strategies that you can act on. And I give
Mm-hmm.
action steps that you can take so that you can work towards dealing with what's going on here inside so that you can then get up in front and talk to people and convey it with power and authority and clarity and inspiration.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's interesting. There was something else I read on your profile, and you frequently write, "Where you are is not where you stay." What makes that like? Where does that come from? What makes that like really important?
Yeah, absolutely. So it comes from me watching my parents, first of all, right? I
Right.
mean, where they were is not where they are. And then it comes from me going speech impediment, awkward kid in Mexico. Now I'm a Mexican kid coming to the United States in a whole different environment. And even though I was in those spots of some just barely getting by, I ended up in a thriving mode instead of just surviving mode.
Right.
And again and again, I tell people as they come to me to work with me,
Uh
and
huh.
they'll say, I'm just not good. And I'll say, okay, that might be your reality right now. But where
Mm-hmm.
you are is not where you have to stay. So if you're nervous, you don't have to stay there. That is a choice. And you might
Right.
not be able to erase your nervousness, but you can at least ease your nervousness.
Mm.
You can do this. So some of that book, Speak with No Fear, is almost a motivational. Here it is. Let me tell you, you can do this. Here's stories from my life. Here's stories from others. You got this. And it's almost like taking a motivational speaker to your home to help you understand you can get where you want to go.
Mm. From your so I think I hear this from you. Let me make sure you're good. From your one of the most important parts to I think a person becoming I guess a speaker or even if they're not just sort of the best version of themselves. From you, I think I'm hearing you tell me if I'm incorrect, is that you have to be self-aware.
You do. Yeah, absolutely. Self-awareness is one of the biggest ways to get better. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when I'm working with my clients, and I have some clients that I'm working with today, someone in London and other people in the United States. When I'm doing this, we always record the session so
Mm-hmm.
they can hear what I hear, and then they can take my thoughts and my feedback and see what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we have no idea. Like if I'm walking around or if I'm in this interview with you and I have a huge piece of kale in my teeth,
Mm-hmm.
that you could see it, but you might not point it out to me. I mean, you would, but others might not point it out to me. But the moment I see myself in the mirror and go, oh, I have a huge green leaf in my teeth, then I
Right.
can improve this situation. And it improves me and improves others. But often we don't see ourselves in the mirror. So
Right.
we have to
Right.
find ways to see ourselves in the mirror. We have to become self-aware that way.
Wow. Um, what aside from your own story, who is there someone or let's say someone is there someone that you find for yourself to be inspirational, like do you have like a hero or other than your own story, other than obviously your parents being that's
Yeah.
everyone's hero, but do you have someone that you look up to, you admire, like you're like a hero?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a guy named Chad Alvarado, and And he has been the most consistent person in my life besides my parents. I mean, he met me when I was maybe about 16, 17, and I was in that crossroads of whether I was going to go down a path towards pastoring or just go into the legal profession. And he met me, and he's the same person then as he is now. And we're still in contact 25 years later. And he's just been that person where even though I've watched him go through some incredible difficulties, and I've watched him change careers and switch things, he's been stable. And I think that what we want in our culture that's ever moving and so contentious and so much conflict happening in our culture, we're looking for stability. And so when I look at someone, I look at him and go, man, here's a person who has been stable in my life from from no matter what. And other people have come and go. And he's been the person who's reached out to me, emailed me, called me, contacted me, when maybe it should be the other way because he's the mentor to me. And yet he's been the person reaching out. Other people, you're really important to them for a little while. I'm sure listeners know this, right? A boss thinks, hey, you're amazing. Or some leader thinks, you're amazing. And then after a while, they fade away. And you think, well, what was that about?
Right.
And Chad has never left that. And so I owe a lot to him and I'm so grateful for him in my life.
I'm randomly thinking of questions as we go along. So one does not necessarily have to do with the other one. During 2020, how has that changed the course of how has this pandemic changed the course or the direction of, what you've been doing? So I know you've been doing a lot of public speaking and stuff like that, conferences and going to different businesses and stuff like that. But this year has been a challenge for us all. And I would imagine, especially for someone in your position. So how has the business or has your life changed in the year of 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've tried some things and failed, first of all. I've tried some things and succeeded, second of all. And then I've switched to trying things that I've done well in person to virtual. So several things I've tried that I thought, at the beginning of the pandemic, you know what will be really helpful is I'll start a public speaking school for kids because parents don't know what to do. Kids are at home. And I think I'll do a really good price on this. And I reached out to some people and just went nowhere, absolutely nowhere. I was kind of shocked because I thought that's something I think I would put my kid in.
Right.
And I have a very legit program that runs for adults. So it's very inexpensive for kids. I still don't understand why that didn't take off, but it didn't work. It failed. And I love that I tried something that failed. I think failure is crucial for us to get used to and get familiar with.
Failure is the key to success.
I tried some things that succeeded. Yeah. I tried some other things and they did take off. And so not only did my programs continue, but I started doing some new workshops that I hadn't done before that I thought would be helpful to people. I started doing some new webinars that have taken off. I started a YouTube channel just about a month and a half ago, and that's taken off. So I've started some new things. And then the last one, I switched a lot from in-person to virtual. So about once a week, I'm giving a virtual communication or even more to a large group of people. And so right over here, I have a screen that comes down. I have multiple cameras. So I've invested in that. I have a backdrop behind me here that is nice as well. And so I can switch from the different views and walk and give it a sense like I'm belonging. I've learned some new software. I've learned some new skills so that I could do that in person. So for a couple companies have said, we don't want that other person. We want Mike to come back because he's by far the most interesting in what he does and the most engaging in how he does it. And I think that's been a huge confidence booster in going virtual in a season like this. But the biggest change of all was we decided to change states. We have a 5-year-old, and we definitely believe the pandemic's real and serious, and we take it serious. But we needed a place for him to be involved in school. And our home state was not opening up and still hasn't opened up and doesn't have plans to open up. So we decided to move closer to family where we could go in in the classes down to 14 people instead of normal 25. The teacher wears a mask and a face guard, and they sanitize every night, and they give us updates every day. So they're doing extremely well in maintaining, and our son's able to go to school and continue to learn, and we're able to continue to move forward in our own professional lives at the same time.
So you move from the West Coast.
To the Gulf Coast. Yeah, so from Washington to Alabama. So it's
Wow,
been very interesting, very different.
that is a
And
move. That is a
yeah,
move.
yeah.
That's definitely a move in climate.
It is. It is. And so it's actually reminding me of what Mexico was like
Yeah.
a long time ago.
My family is from Alabama,
Nice.
and
Nice.
my extended family, and we used to go from DC to Alabama every year for family reunion, and it was hot and muggy, and the part of Alabama that my family was from is Sylacauga, and it's like this red clay everywhere.
Yeah. That red clay, man. I told my son one day, I was like, they're doing some construction near us, and there was a pile of dirt. I'm like, yeah, man, go play in it. No big deal. Yeah, go have fun. And so, and no regrets. I mean, he went in and had fun, and then I washed the clothes and the shoes, and now they're all orange. So I just learned that just be careful what clothes. I believe that little kids need to be able to go out and get dirty, and yeah, sometimes you do need to choose what kind of dirt or when they're allowed to get dirty.
Man, I remember my mother had white cars. She always liked white. Like she had white. It was like a Mercury Ford Taurus or something. It's Mercury Sable. That's what it was. The same car. But we drove down. I remember we drove down to Alabama maybe in the early '90s maybe, and it was just like her whole car was like it was like red clay because it kicked up and it was raining. It was like,
Oh yeah.
oh, terrible. It was this one of those things. All right. Anyway, one thing I always ask everyone that comes on here, because I like to hear different people's perspective on this question, is. And definitely interested in hearing your perspective because your past is so vast, so your perspective on this question will be different than everyone else's. When you look at the world and when you look at the world from your point of view, if there was something that you could change about the way the entire world was, and one thing that you can change about maybe people in general or humanity or what we do, I don't know. If there was one thing that you could change about the world, what would it be?
Empathy. If we could take some time to understand the other side, understand people in a different environment, it would make things better for us and others. We just got through this crazy election season. I remember 4 years ago, and not to get into politics or sides or anything,
It's
in
okay.
fact, the opposite, there was someone who was devastated that Trump had won and that Hillary had not won. And she was a journalist. But instead of doing what so many people did, which was just jump on the bandwagon of not my president, just like other people are doing now,
Right.
she decided that she was going to do something different. So she researched some areas that were impacted by Obama's legislation. And she went out there to understand why people voted for Trump instead of Hillary. And she listened. She didn't try to argue with them. She didn't try to help them see her point of view. And when they saw that she really cared and really wanted to know, and that she wasn't asking questions so that she could rebut them, they opened up. And she said, I never thought of how some things impacted some people.
Sure.
And we often, even when some people hear that right now, you might be quick to go, well, but it did this. And that's exactly what she fought against. Instead of that, well, I have this point of view, she just sought to understand. And she had this empathy for them, like, oh, now it didn't change her mind.
Right.
It didn't even change her feelings, but it changed her view. Now, people who voted for the other way weren't evil, whatever. They were people who had their own reasons. And not everybody has reasons, and on both sides, some people just vote because of the color blue or the color red. But many people are really intentional, really thinking about it. And if we can understand them, now let's get away from politics. I mean, growing up in Mexico, when I think about the issue of immigration, I'm able to see it from both sides because
Yeah.
I know people
Right.
who went across the border illegally. I
Mm.
know I know people who were so struggling and could barely do it, and their dad worked their butt off and did job after job and just couldn't make it. And the kid is got the belly that is it's larger because he's got some worms and just different
Right.
things going on. And so the dad makes extremely difficult decision to pay thousands of dollars to get across. And then he works his butt off extremely hard, 7 days a week, doing whatever Americans don't want to do.
Right.
And he gets paid $10 an hour, and he
Right.
lives with 12 other people, and he sends money back home. And now his family can be taken care of. And seeing that from that perspective, now also seeing it from the other perspective, where
Right.
I'm now in America and I see what that can look like, and understanding just helps us not jump to conclusions. It helps us
Yes.
not be a jerk. It
Absolutely.
helps us take time to understand.
Absolutely. That's a great. Now, so your perspective is so different. So other people have said empathy before, but they, their perspective on it is completely different. So you have written more than just Speak with No Fear.
Right.
And I'm assuming that Speak with No Fear is like your number one selling book. Was that your first book?
It was my first book,
Okay.
and I really wrote it with a lot of heart into it. And then I did a follow-up book called Right to Speak, and I knew that this was never going to be a bestseller. Although some colleges have picked it up to use it for their speech writing part of their public speaking classes. So
Wow.
it's all about how to write a presentation, how to come up
Sure.
with a speech.
Sure.
It's got solid content. It's good. It's not on audio versions where Speak with No Fear has been translated into a couple different languages, and it's really global. Then I wrote a book called Grow Your Soul. It was kind of a pandemic project. It was something I actually wrote when I was 26. And when I got tired and didn't want to go to church anymore, I used the ideas in that book and the thoughts in the book to actually get myself back. So I kind of relaunched some ideas that I had written when I was 26
Sure.
as just here it is. And so if you find yourself tired, you're soul tired, you don't want to go to church, you're wondering about faith, you've been there before, perhaps that is a good book for you. It was more of a personal project. I have put very little energy into pushing it out there.
Right.
And then I co-wrote Lead with No Fear, which would be the second of my, terms of importance, the second of my book. Lead with No Fear is all about what decisions we make personally so that we be the type of people who are leaders, even if we're not leading people in the moment, we're being the type of person who can be a leader. So
Right.
it's not actions a leader takes for others, it's more action a leader takes for themselves so they can be a leader.
That's
And
good.
it's especially relevant in times like this.
Wow, that's good. And that's Lead with No Fear. Now, do you translate that one into audiobook?
Yeah, that one is actually, I think, right in the process of becoming accepted to Audible, but it is
Right.
on audiobooks and Scribed and Spotify and elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. I tell people all the time, like my life is so on the run. Like I'm always like if I'm not doing one thing, I'm moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and so like when I get in my car and I'm going to my next destination, it's like I'm like an audiobook fanatic because I just don't have time to sit down and not multitask.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and if I do have time to sit down and not multitask, that time is probably spent sitting with my wife and not multitasking. So, like, so I'm like an audiobook like fanatic. So,
Yeah.
I've downloaded all types of books and that's just how I get through. So,
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
that's pretty awesome. Where can people? So you offer a lot of different services as far as personally coaching. people as far, when it comes to training and stuff like that. Where can people contact you and get more information about what you do in that context?
Yeah, so mikeacker.com is really the source of, will point you to all these different areas. It'll take you to my company's website. From there, you can schedule calls with us. You can schedule calls with my team. You can find out more about my courses. So it really becomes a place that points you everywhere else.
Right.
I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram more for personal reasons. I have a YouTube, Advance with Mike Acker, and a podcast that launched with that as well. And then if you find me on Amazon, or if you type in Mike Acker or public speaking, you're going to find a bright orange book that points you to my bestseller book and my other ones. And I think right now I'm sitting at 395 reviews or something, mostly positive. There's been a couple. You're an
Man,
idiot.
what's life without the negative reviews? Like you gotta, like you gotta deal with the negative as much as the positive, and it helps you realign yourself to know that everybody isn't, it's not for everybody, and
Right.
it's always good. Like, I think once I accepted that what I do and what, is not for everybody is probably when you can become the most successful, because you stop the expectation that everybody is supposed to like you. And the truth is they don't. It's okay. They don't. And I don't like everybody. It's okay. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. Not to cut you off.
Right. If you see a book out there that has more than 50 reviews, and on Amazon or elsewhere, it has over 50 reviews and doesn't have a negative one, like a 3 or below, then those are just friends or they're paid for reviews. It's when you have a book that has 4.5 stars that they're more legit reviews. Because some people have said this book's not for me, it lacks whatever, it's just all about him, or whatever it might be that they've said. And it just makes it real. I always tell people, you got to embrace rejection. Part of confidence is embracing rejection.
Absolutely. Awesome, man. Listen, I appreciate you coming on. You have given us so many nuggets of wisdom and and stories to go by for this week, man. I really appreciate you so much for doing this, and I really thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on their show, Shawn. Appreciate it. Great dialogue with you. And this is exciting to be a part of.
Hopefully we can do this again sometime in 2021. And you tell me how the new year is working out without the pandemic. And I think there are going to be a lot of people that come out and rise from the pandemic. And I think that, I think culture as we know it, or the structure of society as we know it, will change a lot after this happened. And I actually think it's going to change for the better. There were a lot of things that we were doing that maybe weren't actually really that necessary. When we've learned how to virtually do things, we realize that I didn't really have to be zipping back and forth around the country when we could have been,
Right.
we could have, set up this infrastructure. Maybe sometimes that's necessary, and maybe it's not really that necessary. And so I think that we will learn a lot about a new way to do everything. And I think that you'll rise from that. So it's good to have met you. Good to know you. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Hey, I love it. Thanks so much.
Right.
I look forward to it.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it. When I was 20 years old, I started one of the first multi-artist gospel rap labels in the country. Who listens to that, they said. That has no future is what they told me. That's a dead end, they kept repeating. That's a career killer, they warned me. What they didn't understand is that a pioneer can see past what you think is possible and has the endurance to push it through. And my new media television platform is that pioneer's mind at work once again. I give the unheard a voice. I give the marginalized a stage. And I give the unfortunate a good hand. This is Christian media like you've never seen it before. because this is Shawn Riff-Raff Studios.
I'm a Christian with $100 million vision. Can nobody box me and say that's a contradiction? Goal driven, God just blessed me with ambition. Look up, winner is the rest of definition. Been through hell, but the fire couldn't crisp them. Shut down the mouths of anybody, you dismissed them. 20 years gospel rap broke all the traditions. Cause from a teenager I was on the same mission. So winner, he running God business. He got clothing, plus he got the boss with him. He got a squad with him, real no frauds with him. He run into the light cause he is an optimist. When everybody in the music biz narcissists, I will not rap a thing but my consciousness. Forever always a kingdom rap activist. It took a break for a minute, let's get back to this. Yeah. Been a soul winner, you cannot box me. Control center,